all roads lead to nowhere if you have not decided where you want to go.
Welcome back to the Illuminated Path. This is episode 66. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about another NLP concept that's about figuring out what your present state is and how to get to your desired state. And those are just kind of the terminology that's used, and I'll explain further.
Yeah, how's the week? We skipped our first episode.
We did. We had 65 straight weeks without missing a single episode, and we missed the episode that would have come out on Black Friday. I was sick for like 2 weeks with bronchitis.
Yep.
And it just did not happen. I was not about to sit here trying to talk when I couldn't go more than like 2 minutes without coughing.
Yeah.
But luckily I'm all better now. It was miserable.
Yeah, you were having just awful coughing fits, and I was like, how are we going to do an episode?
Yeah, and I just wasn't sleeping and we were exhausted. So
Yeah.
luckily I was better in time for us to go enjoy Thanksgiving. And that was more important than worrying about missing one episode. So I was a little sad.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
It worked out.
And now we're in a very makeshift studio. We're holding our mics. We are in our living room. Unfortunately, it went from like very beautiful out to very cold very quickly.
Yeah, so we're just kind of chipping away at the basement and trying to get that ready. And in the meantime, this is what we got. We're in the living room again, and don't feel like setting up all the lighting and everything. So
yeah, and the mic stands and all of the things. I think you and I care more than people that are actually listening and watching. So
yeah, it'll be nice when we have the basement and I can like set up my multicam module and do all that, and we have an actual content studio where we're not breaking everything down after every time, because that's the big thing. So
it's a process.
I'm rocking my scally cap today.
One of how many?
So I think there's 4, 5.
Yeah.
5. Yeah. So I tried a scally cap, loved it, and got a bunch more of them, and absolutely loving them. If you don't know what that is, go look it up.
All right, you want to get into it? Anything else?
Let's get started. So
okay,
you are talking about recognizing your present state and your desired state, and you have some really interesting points in here. So why don't you start us off?
So oftentimes we're in some sort of like emotional state, like our present state of being. There's like an emotion tied to it, right? And it's happy, sad, stressed, anxious, angry, whatever it is. And this concept that I'm going to kind of talk about, it's important to recognize what your present state is, like where you are right now, without spending too much time trying to figure out like the past of why you are that way. And not taking so much time just like living in the past or trying to figure out why are you the way that you are right now, or what's going on, and how you can shift your focus and start to think about what your actual desired state is.
I think that's really important too, because when we've talked about this a lot. Like I did a lot of years of therapy, but I ultimately felt like I was just ruminating on stuff with no real reason or progress. And so I think that, looking at the past can be helpful in some situations, but I think when you spend so much time trying to figure out the past, you keep yourself stuck.
Yeah, if you're trying to like overanalyze things, then it kind of prevents you from moving forward. So I want to talk about what we can do. And the biggest thing is that a lot of people don't spend the time figuring out what their desired state is. And yes, like maybe it sounds like goal setting. And there's a level of it that is definitely tied to goal setting, because maybe your desired state is tied to you doing things or experiencing things or, reaching a certain point in your life. And that all makes sense. But thinking about like what your actual desired state is and what that would mean for you to be in that state. Like what life would you be living? What are the things you would be doing? What on a daily basis? What are like the small things that would get you to that desired state?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, it's one of the biggest things you and I have seen is, in watching you in your coaching and growing a life coaching practice, but there's a lot of people who don't define and truly decide what it is they want.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, those are people that can't really be helped, or it's very difficult to help them because they're not willing to define. And usually it's just extreme indecision. Like
Yeah.
they're not willing to work at something long enough to decide that that's what they want, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. Um, and so how do you know what state you want to be in if you've never decided? Like, you have to make that decision for yourself, despite everything else
Yeah.
and everyone else around you. What do you want? What is like your state of being that you want to be in? And how do you get there? Like, what does that actually look like to you for you to feel that way?
Yeah.
And so there was this quote or like concept that said in the teachings from my NLP course, it says all roads lead to nowhere. I missed it. All roads lead to nowhere if you have not decided where you want to go.
Mm,
And that's just basically saying, like, if you're just going through life and letting things happen to you,
yeah.
you're not really deciding things. You're just living and you're not deciding what the end state is, what the end point is. You're just like, okay, like I'm living my day to day and it just is what it is.
Yeah. That makes me think of two things. The first one is that quote, if you don't build your dream, they'll build someone else's. But it also kind of really articulates that indecision is a decision in itself.
Mm,
If you're going through the motions, going with the flow, you're going to get whatever lands in your lap. And there's what happens with people who do that is you end up in this state of like, I'll tolerate this. Yeah, this
yeah.
isn't bad. I like this. And you tend to not make a decision until you end up with something that is extremely uncomfortable or extremely against your values and what you want for yourself. Um, and we've seen people who they go with the flow and they just accept whatever comes their way, and they basically it's almost like not keeping your word with yourself, where you are put in a situation where something extremely uncomfortable happens, and I'm thinking like career, right?
Mm,
And so to give an example, right? Like a remote worker, and they're like, they've always been a remote worker, they've always been a flexible worker, and now it's like, hey, you got to be back in the office or else you're losing your job. And they're like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. That's extremely uncomfortable, right? But we've seen a lot of people who wouldn't want to go through the process of having to find a new job. So they completely change their work life balance, their schedule, everything to go back in the office to comply with this, basically. But it doesn't stop there. Like those sorts of those changes continue, and so I think once you kind of compromise on that really extreme level of something you don't want to do, everything else that follows, you're just more willing to continue to just accept it. And I think those people end up really unhappy in the long run, because they're never willing to make a change for what's meaningful to their values and their life and how they want to live.
yeah. And that exact scenario, like, really goes with that, like, quote. You haven't decided, so you're just following the road.
Right.
And now where are you?
Yeah.
You look up 6 months from then and a year from then, and your whole life has changed. In that particular example, like you used to have all this extra time as a remote worker, and now you don't have that time. So you are giving up things like hobbies, or you're maybe not getting the chance to go to the gym as much as you were, or
Relationship with family and
social life.
yeah.
So many things just changed because you're just going with whatever happens rather than deciding for yourself, like, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to fight for, and this is what I'm going to make in my life, create in my life, find in my life. If that job is taking you down a road that you don't want to go down, then you take a different road.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that conversation. There's no such thing as a state of being unchanged. You're always moving in a direction. So you're either going toward the life you want or you're going away from it.
Mm,
And if it's not clear, we we are aware of some people that this happened to, but they did compromise and go back into the office. And then they ended up getting slammed with a lot of new responsibilities without additional compensation. And those sorts of go with the flow events just kind of continue to pile up. And you've got to decide the direction that you're willing to take them in.
Yeah, like they're literally changing your life for you
Right.
without you actually actively making that decision. And that's, again, like you intentionally deciding
Yeah.
or not.
Hence, indecision is a decision in itself.
Yeah. So the talking about really deciding what your desired state is
Yeah.
and figuring out like what that is. Think about the emotional state. Yeah, everybody can say, we want to be happy all the time, and that's of course an amazing state to aspire to. But there's also the reality that there will be things in life that don't allow you to be happy 24/7 and whatever, but in the overarching, like, take a step back and think about, like, are you in general happy,
Yeah.
content, like, at peace? Is that the state that you are looking for? Because when you are desiring that state and you're able to create a life that, for the majority of the time, allows you to be in that state, then you're not so affected by the stress. You're not so affected by, the ups and downs of life, because overall, your life as a whole and the state that you're in on a normal basis is like the peaceful life that you've wanted to intentionally create for yourself.
Yeah. And I think too, like when you think about your work or the things happening to you, do they feel like that life? Do they feel like that version of you? I think I'm in a unique position to relate this to music when I had no formal music background or learning how to trade and things like that. So, every time I set out to focus on what I desired and what I wanted out of life and the life that I wanted to live, even when I was completely changing everything about my life, the biggest part of that process was being able to sit down and imagine and visualize what that person experienced.
Yeah. Like, what does the day to day look like? What are the things that you do in order to be in that state? What are the small steps, the small everyday things? Like, what does the life look like?
Yeah.
I use the example of like just wanting like peace,
Hmm.
because I feel like that's kind of where we're at. Like,
Yeah.
we want, socialization with our close friends and families. But when I was younger, I probably would have said, oh, like fun and excitement. And now I'm like, yeah, I have my fun and excitement, but it's in a different way. And then, like, we want to create a life where we're not crazy busy. We have our home, like, is
I want
our
to
favorite
farm.
place to be.
I just
So do
I
I.
just want to farm. I want to
I'll
live off
have
the
my
land.
ducks someday
Yeah.
at our next house.
Next
But
house.
yeah, so what does that really look like? And deciding like that's the path that you're going to start to take. That doesn't mean everything changes tomorrow.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, this does relate to goal setting. Um but it's taking it in a different, like, it's taking a look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
And like, how do I want to feel? What do I want to be
I think
before you say like, how can I check off a box to reach a goal?
yeah, and it's making a decision obviously is important, but I this also goes back to our other conversations of like being an adult is also deciding like, hey, I didn't like that decision. Maybe I don't want to do that. Like, and I think I've talked about this before with MMA, but like when I started training mixed martial arts, I was like, I'm gonna compete. That's what I want to do. I want to get in a cage. And I ended up deciding I loved the lifestyle. It wasn't about like I need to compete. And I actually went the other way and became all about the family of it and not really liking when people brought their ego onto the mat. But I had the ability to look at that and say, this was my initial intention. It's still for me, but I want to do it a little differently.
Mhm.
And I think that, when we talk about needing to make a decision, you have, like you got to decide what it is you want to do and what direction you want to go in. But that doesn't mean like you're glued to that. It means you're putting enough effort and time toward it to start to feel it and decide if it is in fact what you want.
Yeah.
Like when I started trading, it was like sit on the computer every day. I was doing New York Open 9:30 to 11, and I was trading that, and I would have winning trades, and that would be cool. And it would be like, okay, so this is what it would be like, you know? And you expose yourself and put yourself into that role. When I started learning how to make music, I shadowed a musician. I went to his studio and learned how they record music. What?
Keep going.
I just think that, you always have to be able to put yourself in those positions to really get a taste of that life. Like when I decided I was going to train MMA, that was when I took the Krav Maga trial, and I was like, hell yeah,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be ever, forever, but you've got to make the decision about the direction you want to go and try and get a taste of it before, you say, yeah, this is my next, like I've tried things and haven't wanted to do it forever. But like with trading, I can tell you to have the ability to trade 2 hours a day and make a living and have the freedom for my family and to work on my music, that is the life I'm designing.
Yeah.
I tried it, I got a feel for it, and I'm deciding like that is my next 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Why were you smiling? What was that about?
Because you were just going on with like a bunch of different examples. So I was just kind of like, okay, I'm just here listening.
Yeah. Well,
But
I
they were all
think
good
there's a lot of
examples.
validity to it. Like
No, I
you
know.
gotta you have to make the decision to try and put in the effort and actually not just live that lifestyle of like, I think like people, I know I'm on a tangent, but like you think about the Instagram influencers who have the Lamborghini, and people want the Lamborghini. They don't want to do the daily task, you know? So when you set out to design your life for something, you don't look at what the big goal is and what it means, right? You look at what that person experiences on a daily basis.
Mm.
That's how you get there.
Yeah. It's moving with intention and keeping like that ultimate goal of how you want to feel and like the environment that you want to create for yourself rather than, setting up a goal and being like, this is what I have to reach and I won't be happy until I get it. Because,
Yeah.
like you said, that might change. You might change your mind, and that's totally fine. You can change direction and still move with intention towards doing it in a different way that feels better to you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think business owners know this better than anybody. You're just always pivoting and doing something new, wearing a new hat. And you've got to be able to pivot and make different moves on the fly. If you're too attached to one outcome or one way of getting there, you're going to hold yourself back, and you're going to likely not get there because you don't really get to define the way it happens.
Yeah. So the only way to, really get to your desired state is to change and accept the responsibility for change because you are the only one who can make change in your life in whatever way that is. Like, that is up to you. You are the sole person responsible for creating the change in your life to get to that desired state, intentionally deciding it and intentionally starting to move towards it.
Mm, yeah. You know, the line that changed my life: nobody's coming to save you.
Yeah.
It's all on you. Yeah. I think, take responsibility, but make the decision about what direction you want to move in. And, this gets into a larger conversation of you're in your 20s, you're young, you can mess around and find out in your 20s. And, especially if you're in your 20s, you can afford to make the decision and spend a couple years there and figure out it's not for you. I think people are so afraid of like deciding that they're going to change their mind down the line that they don't ever start.
Yeah.
And I think I have the utmost respect for people who are willing to make those decisions and start even later in life. So make the decision, because the only difference is time passes and you just won't have made it.
Right.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.